أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. So last time, if you remember, we talked about, can anybody remind me what we talked about last time? Anyone remember?
Bringing up of
You missed the last one, isn't it? Yeah. Nobody remember?
Abu Talib died.
No, we didn't talk about that yet.
One of the person of Halima Sahdiya.
Yes, we were talking about, yes, that's right. That's where we stopped last time. So we talked about the Prophet ﷺ's birth and then how he was taken into the desert to be raised. And we talked about the first opening of his chest and how the angels washed his, they took something out of his chest and they closed it again. And that scared Halima because she found that there was a lot of barakah in their household, in their life in general, while the Prophet ﷺ was under their care. So that's why she went back when he turned 2, because she had to, that's the time that you have to return the child to the parents. But she insisted, she said, oh, just let me keep him, the atmosphere here is not good, it's much better in the desert. She tried to convince her mother and she took him back. When this incident happened, she got a bit shaken up and she did not want something bad to happen to the Prophet ﷺ while he's under her care. Because on the one hand, she was benefiting from his presence, but on the other hand, she also genuinely loved him and cared about him. And she didn't want anything bad to happen to him. So soon after this incident, she rushed back to Makkah and she said to Amina, she said, here's your child, take him back. So Amina said to her, she said, what happened, you came, you justified reasons for why he should go back with you, and now all of a sudden you're bringing him back. She said, no, this and that, she tried to dodge the question, and then eventually she told her what had happened. And so his mother, the Prophet's mother Amina, she said to Halima, she said, do you think that something bad would happen to him? She said that when I was pregnant with him, I saw a light that came out of me and it went all the way up to Sham. And she said, I have a feeling that this boy will grow up and become something big and Allah will protect him. So nothing bad will happen to him. But anyway, she took her son back and Halima went back. When the Prophet ﷺ was back with his mum, he was about 6 years old and his mother passed away. So from the age of about 2 to 6, he was with his mother, and then at the age of 6, she passed away. And he was completely orphaned now. No father, no mother. And do you know who he was adopted by? Abdul Muttalib, his grandfather. Yeah. So that Abdul Muttalib, we have to just, knock our memories a little bit. So you remember Hashim, who used to crush bread, and that's why he was called Hashim. Hashim had a brother called Shayba, who they named Abdul Muttalib because he came with Muttalib and they thought he was a slave, right? So this person is the uncle of, he is, how can I explain it? Anyway, Abdul Muttalib had a son called Abdullah, who was the father of the Prophet ﷺ. So Abdul Muttalib is the grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ, okay? So his care went into the hands of his grandfather. And even that did not last very long. The Prophet ﷺ was about 8 years old and Abdul Muttalib passed away. And now his care went into the hands of Abu Talib, and it lasted for almost 40 years or more into his prophethood. So right now we're just talking about him as a child, okay? All right. Now, this time like I said to you, that I would talk to you a little bit about his pre-prophethood years. So right now, he's a child, then he becomes a youth, he's growing up, he's still not received any revelation, he's not, gone into becoming a prophet yet. He's just an ordinary person right now. But the Prophet ﷺ was always protected by Allah. Obviously, this person is chosen by Allah to deliver his message, to carry his message. So this person is going to be overlooked and taken care of by Allah. Like we said, at the age of 2, his chest was opened. So Allah's care is with him from the beginning. And like we said, like his mother said, that there was a light that shone from her. So from the time of his conception, there's something special about him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used to protect him from all sorts of sins and incorrect actions. And the Prophet ﷺ narrated an example of that. He said that he was a shepherd, and one day he told, now obviously because he was a shepherd, he was out of the city of Mecca. So he was in the deserts or in the outskirts. So he said to his friend who was also shepherding with him, he said, I want to attend one of the parties in Mecca, because in Mecca there used to be lots of parties, and I will talk to you a little later on about the kind of life that was existing in Mecca at that time. People were really astray. There were brothels, there was all sorts of things in Mecca. Anyway, so there used to be these parties with music and singing and dancing and all this. And so he was a young man, and he said, I want to attend one of these parties, because he never gets to, because he's shepherding. So he said to his friend, he said, if you look after the sheep for me, I will go and attend one of these gatherings. And so he said that I told my friend to take care of my flock until I come back. He agreed. I went into Mecca, and I arrived at the place where they were having this party. And as soon as I started to hear the music, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala struck my ears, so I fell asleep. And this happened to him on 2 occasions. Because on this occasion, he fell asleep, and then when he woke up, everything was finished. The party was over. So he was really confused, and he went back, and he said to his friend the next day, he said, I want to attend this party again. So he made the same agreement with his friend, and his friend agreed to look after his flock. And he went the second time again to Mecca to attend this party. And he said the same thing happened. As soon as he arrived at the party and he starts hearing, the celebration or music or whatever, he says something, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala struck his ears and he falls asleep. And then when he wakes up, everything is finished. So when it happened the second time, he knew that this is a sign from Allah and Allah is trying to protect him or keep him away from something. So he didn't attempt it again. Okay, so he said that I woke up after the party was over and I realized that this is a sign to me from Allah. Another example is next to the Kaaba, they had these 2 idols called Is'af and Na'ila. Of course, they had the big Hubal, but they had lots of other idols with names. And it was their tradition that as they would do tawaf, they would touch these idols. And the Prophet ﷺ said to Zayd, who was his servant, and then he was his adopted son. He said to him, don't touch it. So Zayd said that as we went round again, I told myself I would touch it to see what would happen. Because at that time there was nothing to stop them from touching the idol. So he's thinking, why is he saying that don't touch the idol? And so he said, when I did so, the Prophet ﷺ asked me, were you not forbidden to do that? And then Zayd said that the Prophet ﷺ never saluted an idol. He never, prayed to an idol. He had nothing to do with idols until right up to when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored him and gave him the revelation. So he never had any involvement with idols or idol worship. And of course, it makes you think that who is telling the Prophet ﷺ what is causing these feelings inside him that he feels that he should not touch an idol. Obviously this is guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why for example in fiqh, for example, they say that if something wavers in your heart, then just leave it. Because sometimes somebody will tell you, oh, this is halal, this is permissible, this is okay, this is fine, but something in your heart is just not settling, you just can't accept it. Even though 200 people are, in favor of it and everybody's saying this is fine, this is okay, but it wavers in your heart, the Prophet ﷺ said, leave it. Because this kind of, you should, like they say, consult your heart. Because your heart is the seat of a lot of important things that are going on in your heart, and a lot of it is coming directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if something is not settling in your heart, leave it. Okay. And so the people who were growing under the care of the Prophet ﷺ, he would advise them not to do these things. So one of them was Zayd, and the other person he always told not to touch idols or get involved with idols was Ali ibn Abi Talib. Because due to, some level of difficulty and poverty in Abu Talib's house, the Prophet ﷺ took Ali and said, I will, raise him in my house. And so that's why Ali also never worshipped any idols. Okay. Now the first profession of the Prophet ﷺ was what? Shepherd. Yes, he was a shepherd, like all the Anbiya. And it is very interesting that all the prophets and messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have been through this training process of shepherding. And one would think, why shepherd? None of us really give any importance to this profession. You just think a shepherd is just a guy who just sits around while the sheep graze and then he takes them back. What is the big deal in it? Well, you will see today, inshallah, that there are many levels to understand in shepherding and why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose this profession for all his anbiya. And the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, Allah has not sent a prophet that was not a shepherd of sheep. And his companions asked, and you? He sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, yes, I used to herd sheep with compensation from the people of Makkah. So every prophet has gone through this. Perhaps one of the prophets who has been through the longest period of shepherding is, do you know? Sorry? No, not Isa. No. No. Yes, Musa alayhi salam. So if you remember in the story, the father of the girl, he said to him that, do 8 years, and if you want, you can complete the term and make it 10. And the Prophet ﷺ was very curious to find out that did he do 8 years or 10 years, because it's not mentioned anywhere. So he asked Jibreel alayhi salam, and Jibreel said to the Prophet ﷺ that Musa alayhi salam completed the complete term with, you could say with ihsan. He did the whole thing. Can you imagine 10 years of shepherding? 10 years. But then look at how much patience Musa alayhi salam needed with his people. His people, they were really, really difficult with him. So we will see now what are some of the lessons that you learn. The first and the most important lesson that you learn from shepherding is responsibility. Because remember, these sheep are not yours, right? They belong to somebody else. They are just under your care, and you are accountable to the person for whom you are doing this job, for whom you are looking after these sheep. So the first thing is responsibility, because this is not yours to do with what you please. And if something goes wrong, you can't go to the owner now and say, this sheep was being really stupid and she just ran off, so what shall I do? Because it's the sheep is not responsible for itself. You are. Similarly, everybody has responsibility. So the king is responsible for his nation, the husband is responsible for his household, the manager is responsible for his company, the mother is responsible for her kids. When my husband comes home, if one of the children is hurt, I cannot say to him, oh, he was acting really stupid and he just jumped off the staircase, He will say to me, where were you when he was jumping off the staircase, right? Because He's under my care and responsibility. So the first and primary lesson that shepherding teaches you is that it teaches you responsibility. And the Prophet ﷺ used this as an example. If you remember the hadith, he said, you are all shepherds and you are all responsible for your flock. And he uses, in a number of ahadith, you will see he gives the example of sheep and flock. And I will give you a few more as we go along. And so regardless of whose fault it is, the responsibility comes on the shepherd. So if anything goes wrong, anything happens, it's the shepherd's neck that is on the line, not anybody else's. And so it's a very important lesson for a person in a leadership position to learn responsibility and to learn that I am answerable for what happens to these people. They're not answerable just on their own. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he asked, I think it was on the day of Hajj, he asked the people that, have I fulfilled my duty? Have I conveyed the message? Because on the day of Qiyamah, he has to answer that did he do his job? Because we're just, ordinary sheep. We need to be told what to do and how to do it. If nobody tells us, then we're not responsible. But if someone tells us and then we go and do something else, now we are responsible. But primarily the responsibility is on the Anbiya. And so they will all be asked on the Day of Judgment. And that's why, for example, he wanted to clear his name and make sure that he has completed his responsibility and fulfilled his duty. Okay. The second thing is it teaches you patience. Have you ever seen shepherds? They just have to sit on a rock and wait until the sheep graze to their fill. And you can't say to the sheep, can you please hurry up and finish up so we can go because, I need to get home, I need to do this. You can't do that. They will take their time and you just have to sit there and wait. There is nothing else really that you can do. And patience is so important. So you can imagine 10 years of shepherding for Musa alayhi salam, how much patience he would have learned you just have to sit there and wait until it's all finished. And they really tested his patience, Bani Israel, right? Look at Nuh alayhi salam. 950 years of preaching and nobody is willing to accept your message. I mean, we couldn't say the same thing for 9 days. We will run out of patience, On the 10th day, we'll say, khalas, that's it, I'm throwing in the towel. That's why, for example, there are so many divorces nowadays. People's marriages are breaking like you break bread. Nobody has patience. People just want, everything has to happen quickly. Everything has to happen like with the click of a finger. Especially with, today's age of technology. The more technology is coming into our existence and our societies, the more people are becoming impatient. Everything has to happen at the click of a button, Sometimes if you press a button on your phone, right, and your phone lags, you just think, what's happening? It's been like 3 seconds and the page hasn't loaded. This is how we've become. Whereas, one of the most important ingredients in our life is patience, is sabr. Everything requires sabr. Whether it is bringing up children, whether it is marriage, whether it is employment, working, whether it is studying, whether it is memorization of Quran. Everything you put your hand into, it requires sabr. It requires patience. And if you don't have patience, it becomes very difficult to achieve your goal. So this is one of the main things that it teaches you, shepherding, it teaches you patience, because for hours and hours and hours you just have to sit and wait. Okay. The third thing it teaches you is protection. So the shepherd is responsible to protect the flock from various dangers. Wolves, other dangerous animals, diseases, dangerous areas, beasts, anything that could harm the sheep, you have to, keep an eye on it. So you can't just go and just sit on the rock and just ignore what is happening to the sheep. You're sitting there and waiting, and you're watching and making sure that everything around the sheep is safe. Sometimes you'll have a sheep wandering off. You have to make sure that, they don't go too far and that, they are safe. So it teaches you protection. And doing this as a profession, the Prophet ﷺ, he has obviously been well trained in protecting his flock, right? So when he was a prophet, once they said that there was some commotion in Medina. And so some of the Sahaba, they got their weapons, they got onto their horses, and they started riding towards the source of the noise. And they said, as we were going there, the Prophet ﷺ was returning, and he said to us, he said, everything is okay. So you see, he was there before anybody else. He had made sure that everything was safe, and he was on his way back. So he's protecting his flock. He's making sure that nothing harms them. You know, like for example, the Prophet ﷺ said to his people, he told us about Dajjal, right? And he said to them that if he comes while I am with you, I will take care of him. But he said, if he comes after I'm gone, then you will have to, do this and this to look after yourselves. And I think to myself sometimes, how wonderful it would have been if he was amongst us. Because he had so much care, so much concern, so much love for his ummah. It's he loved people he had never seen, like us, And he gave his Sahaba the example. He said that one of them will be equal to 50 of you. And they said, how comes? And he said, because they have not even seen me and they are following the message. And of course we're living in some really horrible times, times of fitan and difficulty and etc. Okay. So the Prophet ﷺ, in his effort to protect us, he warned us about all sorts of dangers, including, things which had not come or he did not know when they are going to come, such as Dajjal. And that's why when we make dua, one of the duas we should make is we should ask Allah that Allah give us everything that the Prophet ﷺ asked you for and protect us from everything that the Prophet ﷺ sought protection in you from. Because he did it all. It's a complete A to Z of what we need and what we need to be protected from. It's a complete A to Z that he has already done. So you just ask Allah that, Allah, I ask you for whatever the Prophet ﷺ asked you for, and I seek refuge in you from whatever the Prophet ﷺ sought refuge in you from, and you've covered everything. Because there's nothing that he left or he didn't tell us. Sometimes people hide things to have an upper hand. Like sometimes you'll see people who, for example, silly things like recipes. You take a recipe from someone and they'll tell you everything and they'll leave one thing out so that you don't make it exactly like them. I mean, this is so silly. But I'm just saying that, people like to have an upper hand because they need to know that, nobody even comes close to me. But the Prophet ﷺ, he wanted the best for us, right? And he wanted to tell us everything that will benefit us, and he wanted to tell us everything that will harm us so we can save ourselves and protect ourselves. Okay. The fourth point is that these animals, these sheep, they are very close to the earth. Like if you were to stand next to a sheep, the sheep is closer to the earth than you are, right? And so they're not very far-sighted. They can't see very far. But the person who is looking after them and tending to them, he can look further than them. And so he is in a better position to see any danger that is coming or any danger that is around them. And he's in a better position to protect them. And the Prophet ﷺ, he gave his analogy, and he said, the analogy of me and you is, I'm like somebody standing next to this fire. So he said that it's like there is a fire and I'm standing next to it. And he said, you are attracted to it and you are jumping in it while I am grabbing you by your clothes and dragging you away, and you are releasing yourselves from me and jumping into the fire. I remember I used to read this as a teenager and I didn't really understand this hadith. But have you seen, if you have a light or if you have lit a fire or something like that outdoors, you will see these insects who are attracted to the fire and they keep coming close to it, and then if it's a real fire, they will just burn and go in. And that's the technology actually that they use to their advantage when they make these they make these lit up things that they put in shops and restaurants to catch insects. And I always used to wonder, that why do these stupid insects go there and get killed? Because you just see them going there and then you hear bzzz, and that's it. That's the end of that insect. Because they are attracted to light and they want to go to the light. But what they don't know is that this is going to actually kill me or harm me, right? And this is exactly the example that the Prophet ﷺ gave of us. He said, it is like as if there is a fire that I have kindled and I'm sitting around it, or that there is a fire in front of me and I'm sitting around it, and you people are rushing into this fire and I'm grabbing you by your clothes and pulling you out of it, and you are releasing me from, catching you, and you are rushing into it. This is our example. The Prophet ﷺ is warning us and trying to save us and tell us, don't go into the fire. He's trying to save us from going into the fire. The Prophet ﷺ, he wanted as many people as possible to get guidance. Remember, that's why we asked that question when we said that there were so many battles that the Prophet ﷺ fought. He was basically a warrior. And how many people did he kill? Because he was rahmatullahi alal alameen. Ya rahmatul lil alameen. And his mission was not to kill as many people as possible. Even the kuffar, he wanted them to come to Islam. He wanted to save people from the hellfire. He wants as many people as possible to enter Jannah. So this is what he said, that that the Anbiya, they can see the dangers and they know what is good and what is bad for their people, and they warn them, but the people don't listen, and the people rush into evil, into bad, into haram, into the fire. And just like those insects, zap, in a second they're gone. What did they achieve? Nothing. So, okay. And sometimes, maybe it hurts people to read certain descriptions of the hellfire, to read certain ahadith about punishment, about the things that will happen to people who disobeyed Allah. And you might think, oh my God, this is really like too descriptive, and it's too painful to read or to know that this will happen to somebody. But this is being done not to hurt you or to harm you. It is being done to protect you and to save you. Just like, if I have a hot pot of water on the stove, okay, and let's say I'm going to the bathroom and my children are in the kitchen, and I tell them, look, if you put your finger in this, your skin is going to come off and we're going to be able to see your bone and we're going to have to rush to the hospital. Now, I'm not giving them this horrible description because I hate them and I want them to have a scarred memory, when they grow up and remember that, oh, my mother said this is going to happen. But I'm trying to protect them. I don't want them to even think about going near this pot of water because I know this is going to burn them. So some descriptions which are given, number one, primarily they are to protect you and to scare you enough to sort of shock you, or to warn you and to make you aware that you're heading towards something dangerous. And secondly, sometimes you see and hear of people committing the most heinous crimes. You hear of pedophiles and rapists, and when you hear the kind of things that people get up to, you start to understand why the hellfire was even created. I mean, there are some really horrible individuals in this world. I know you and me, some of us would not even imagine the kind of things that they commit. But there are people like that. And there is hellfire for them if they are not guided before they leave the dunya. Okay. The fifth thing that it teaches you is simplicity. When you're a shepherd and you're going out into, the fields or into the desert to graze animals, you are, number one, going to be very light. You can't take too many things, right? I'm going to take my bag and my books and my gadgets and my this and my bottles. You can't take so many things. You have to be very light because you have to be able to run around and walk around and look after these animals. And secondly, like I said, it makes you detached from everything else because you can't have the comforts, the creature comforts that we enjoy as a shepherd, because you're out in the middle of nowhere and you can't really have anything with you. So it's just basically you and contemplation and looking after these animals and afkar. You can't really do much else. So it teaches you, simplicity. No cold drinks, no steakhouse, soup and salads. None of that. It has to be something very basic, very simple that you can manage in that area. So their food is simple, their clothes will be simple, right? You can't go in a bow tie to look after sheep. The next thing it teaches them is to get accustomed to different environments, because you can't say to the owner of the sheep that I'm only going to take these sheep if the weather is good. No, the sheep, they need to eat every day. And neither can you have any weekends and say, okay, my sheep, for 2 days, just fast because I'm going, on a weekend. There's no weekends, there's no holidays, it doesn't matter if it rains, it shines, there's storm, there's sandstorm, there's hail. The sheep need to eat. They're living creatures. You can't deprive them of their food. So you get used to all kinds of circumstances. And as a messenger or as a da'iyah or as somebody who's conveying the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that person has to be accustomed to all kinds of climates. Because you have to basically face lots of storms once you become a messenger of Allah. And so you have to be, you have to be able to face those kind of climates once you have that job of being a messenger of Allah. You have to travel. For example, when we talk about the battles, some of the battles were in very, very difficult circumstances. But they had to be done. So that's the thing that it just makes you learn how to get accustomed to and accommodate all sorts of situations. And the last thing is closeness to the creation of Allah. Looking after a flock of sheep takes you away from the artificial world and puts you in touch with nature, because you've got trees, plants, these living animals. Sometimes living in a concrete world, in an artificial world, it takes us away from being in touch with nature and familiarizing ourselves with Allah's creation, because we see so many lights and buildings and cars and artificial things that it almost desensitizes us. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you read in the Quran, He keeps talking about, for example, clouds and rain and mountains and lakes and seas, and He talks a lot about contemplating and nature. And so that is a very good opportunity to get away from everything. A lot of us, I think, when we travel during the summer, if we do go anywhere for vacation, we try and get away from city, right? We try and go into somewhere where there's just lots of country or trees, or because you get so much of this, you just get fed up of malls and restaurants, and you just want to get away from it all and just see mountains and trees and that kind of thing. And of course, one of the things that teaches us is about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the creator, the fashioner. He is merciful. You think of all of Allah's attributes when you see nature, which you don't really get when you're seeing so much technology and buzzing and etc. Now, these are some of the lessons that they learned as being shepherds, the Anbiya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They learned some of these lessons by being shepherds. Now, why were they not looking after cows or camels? If you think about it, each animal has a different personality, and the caretaker has a different personality. In the sense that if you see cowboys, for example, cowboys have a very they have a bit of a rough personality, because cows are not as soft as sheep. They are a bit tough. Okay, so you have to be a bit tough. Of course, there were no cows in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, in the sense in that area, but there were camels. Again, a camel is a very arrogant animal, and you have to match that arrogance with strength. You can't be soft and gentle with him, because he will just overpower you. So there is a lot of hikmah why it's sheep that they had to look after, because I think we as humans, we are very similar to sheep. We are weak, we are not very far-sighted, we get excited really quickly. If you see a little bit of dazzle and color, we think, oh, let's go there, without thinking, that is that dangerous, is that safe, is that, our nature is very similar to that. And so the Anbiya, and because sheep are also soft-natured animals, they are delicate animals, you can't be very rough with them. You have to, take them from place to place, but gently, with gentleness and patience. So all these things, they tend to be reasons why they looked after sheep and not other animals. Another thing that this reveals is that it's both-sided. Your profession determines your personality, and your personality determines your profession. So a lot of the times you will see people will gravitate towards the profession that is in line with their personality. So doctors, for example, are not like engineers, and engineers are not like mechanics, and mechanics are not like teachers. So it's almost as if your personality is going to determine your profession, but then your profession is further going to nurture that personality trait in you. So for example, teachers, they tend to be very sort of like father figures, with everybody. So if you ever, meet a teacher, they will probably give you a lesson or two as well. Similarly, for example, doctors, they forget how to write after a while, right? Doctors are known to have the most terrible handwriting in the world, because it's not a writing profession, right? It's more hands-on, examining, thinking what could be wrong, and prescribing medicines, calculations. So their handwriting is terrible. Similarly, if you see, for example, lawyers, I find that a lot of people who are argumentative, they love this profession, because they love to have something to argue about, to discuss. Whereas some people who are very soft-natured, they would never go anywhere close to the profession of being a lawyer, So it's this whole profession of shepherding, this has the qualities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to inculcate in His Anbiya. And so it is the perfect thing for them, and it nurtures, their personalities. It's almost like, the tarbiyah that Allah is giving His Anbiya before they become prophets. Because remember, they do this before they become prophets. Yeah. Okay. The next important event that happened during the early years of the Prophet ﷺ, before prophethood, was called Al-Hilf Al-Fudul. And the story behind this is that there was a man who came from Zabid in Yemen to do business in Mecca. He brought some merchandise and he gave it to somebody called Al-As bin Wa'il. And Al-As bin Wa'il promised to pay him back. But what he did was, he went back on his words and he refused to pay the man. And he took advantage of the fact that he's a foreigner. He's come from outside Mecca. What will he do? He's probably going to, scream and shout, cry a little, and go back to Yemen, and I can just keep all the money and the merchandise. However, this man, he stood up for his right. So he went to a public place in Mecca, and he started calling the people of Quraysh. And he said to them, I'm oppressed in your land. All you people who are going to stand up for my right, will you allow this oppression to happen in your land? And he said a few emotional words. Now, the Arabs were people of pride and principle, okay? And they are not going to accept anybody saying that they took somebody's right. So they arranged a meeting, and some of the families gathered together and said, we're going to discuss this case. And one of the families was the family of the Prophet ﷺ. And they gathered in the house of Abdullah bin Jad'an, who was known to be a very generous man, and he was a person who would stand up for people's rights. So it was symbolic that they had the meeting in his house, because he was known to do those kind of things. And they had this meeting, and they made an agreement that they would stand together to protect the rights of the oppressed. And this happened before prophethood. But the Prophet ﷺ said, I witnessed in the house of Abdullah bin Jad'an a pact made that I wouldn't have exchanged it for the choicest herd. And if it had been suggested after Islam, I would have responded positively to it. So what he's saying is that even before Islam, although this was done before Islam, but he's saying that even if this was done after Islam, I would have wholeheartedly supported something like this. So what this is teaching us is that you should be, as a Muslim, you should be on the side of the haqq, regardless of whether it's a Muslim or a non-Muslim, but you should be on the side of what you consider to be right and correct. Okay? So, like for example, oppressing someone is not correct. So, regardless of whether it's a Muslim or a non-Muslim being oppressed, you should support the person if you feel that he is right and the others are wrong. Okay. Now we are going to talk about his merchandise, by the way, was returned to him after they had this meeting. Okay, and then the Prophet ﷺ said, I was very young, but they took me to this meeting. Okay. The next important event is the marriage of the Prophet ﷺ to Khadija. And in the next few sections, we will discuss some very important things about the Prophet ﷺ's marriage, because this is a point which Orientalists or non-Muslims or philosophers or, whatever you want to call them, they find this as a point to attack Islam and Muslims. The marriage of the Prophet ﷺ. They will call him all sorts of names and nasty words that they will use to describe him based on this. And we will clarify some of those doubts, inshallah. So the first is his marriage to Khadija radiallahu anha. Now Khadija radiallahu anha, does anybody know the name of her father? Yes? Khuwaylid. Yes, Khuwaylid. So she is Khadija bint Khuwaylid. And she was not married at the time she met the Prophet ﷺ, as in she was either a widow or she was divorced. She was an elderly woman, and she was a very successful businesswoman. And what she would do is, because she was elderly, she used to hire a man to go and do business on her behalf. And of course, she would have to make sure that this individual is trustworthy, because she is handing over, her merchandise and her wealth, and he has to go far away to do this business and come back. So he shouldn't be somebody who's going to run off with her things, right? So she heard, and they used to have two main business trips, you could say. And Allah mentions that in Surah Al-Quraysh. One in the summer, one in the winter. One to Yemen and one to Sham. Okay? And so she heard about the Prophet ﷺ, and she heard about his honesty and that he's a very trustworthy individual. So she hired him, and she said to him to go on a business trip for her with a servant of hers called Maysara. Now when they came back, Maysara came and said to her, he said, this man is amazing. He said his honesty and his integrity is at the next level, and he said that I have never seen anything like this. This man is amazing. So he came and he gave her a report about how outstanding this man was. And she was really impressed with the Prophet ﷺ, and she was one of the noble women in Mecca, and she could have really married anyone of her choice. And so she, because she was wealthy as well, she would have had lots of suitors. So she proposed to the Prophet ﷺ and wanted to marry him. Now the Prophet ﷺ at that time was 25 years old and she was 40. So there was an age difference of 15 years between the two of them. Okay, and similarly, the Prophet ﷺ, he was a young man, he was good looking, he was from a very good family, good lineage, right? He could have married any woman of his choice. If he was, like they describe, lustful and, just interested in women, why would a 25-year-old marry a 40-year-old woman? And while he was married to Khadija radiallahu anha, he did not marry anyone else. He was happily married with her, and she bore him all his children except one. So she gave birth to Ruqayya, Kulthum, Zainab, Fatima, Abdullah, and Al-Qasim. Yes?
When did Khadija die? I mean, what age?
I'm not sure. I think she was in her... Yeah, I think she was in her...
A difference of opinion between the age of Khadija?
Because when the Prophet ﷺ was about 50, that's when he did some of his other marriages. So he would have been married to her, and he was unmarried for about 2 or 3 years after her death. So if he was married from the age of 25, when he was 50, let's say if he was about 45, she would have been, I think she was in her 60s, but she died after the boycott. There was a boycott that happened where for 3 years they didn't marry into them, they didn't do any business with them, they were living in a faraway valley. You could just hear screams from there and things like that. So that stress and that whole situation, it really affected her health, and after that her health really deteriorated and she passed away.
Is there a difference of opinion in this age of 40?
No, there's no difference of opinion in that, no. As far as I know, no. I've recently heard that there's a difference of opinion on the age of Aisha radiallahu anha, that she married him at the age of 19 or 18. But I have never heard that or read that anywhere apart from one source, so I will stick with...
Yasir Khadi's Seerah lectures, he mentions that there is some difference of opinion about this 40 years.
So how old does he say she was?
I don't know really, but he says
Okay.
something like this.
As far as I know from my, the information that I have at hand, I just know that she was 40 and he was 25, and there's no discrepancy in that. Okay. And the Prophet ﷺ's descendants to date are from, through Khadija radiallahu anha, because they are through Fatima and the children of Fatima. That's the only descendants he has. Because, his other daughters passed away, his sons passed away, and he did not have any other descendants other than her. And it is interesting that the Mahdi is said to arise from the family of Hassan, who is one of the sons of Fatima radiallahu anha, or from his lineage, from his family. Okay. So we know that, that family is going on. Okay, he doted on Khadija radiallahu anha, and he was very happily married to her. There are no reports that while he was married to Khadija, he thought of or he decided or he was planning to marry anybody else. There is nothing like that. He was very happily married with Khadija radiallahu anha. And even after she passed away, he would always remember her, always mention her name. When her sister would come, her voice was similar to Khadija's, and he would really miss Khadija radiallahu anha. And sometimes he would slaughter an animal and say distribute it to the friends of Khadija radiallahu anha. And also Aisha radiallahu anha says that he wouldn't leave the house before mentioning and praising Khadija radiallahu anha. This is how much he loved her and how much he doted on her. And Aisha radiallahu anha says that I was not jealous of any of his other wives apart from Khadija, and she said I never saw her because he never married anyone while he was married to her. But this is how strong his love for her was, that one of his wives is jealous of somebody who's not even alive anymore. And she said that the Prophet ﷺ said that I have been given by Allah her love, or that, Allah has put this love in my heart for Khadija. There's no other explanation for it. And of course, she stood by him in his most difficult times. When nobody was with him, she was with him. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, once Aisha said to him, she said, was she not just an elderly woman, that Allah has replaced her for you with what is better, referring to herself, because she was very jealous of her. And the Prophet ﷺ was upset, and he said, no, by Allah, He did not replace me with anyone better. For she had faith in me when the people rejected. She believed me when the people belied me. She made comfortable with what she had when the people denied me, and Allah has blessed me with children from her. So he is saying that nobody matches up to her. Nobody comes even close to her. And, sorry?
Not even you.
Yes, referring to her indirectly and saying, yeah, not even you, yes. And that's like really eating her up from inside, because she wants to be number one. The Prophet ﷺ would become angry if anyone said anything against Khadija radiallahu anha. And this is years after she has passed away. This shows his loyalty. The man was not fickle, because some of us, right, we show a lot of love and, respect and reverence for somebody while they're around us. And as soon as they're gone, it's like, you don't even think about them again. Even people who are close to us, people who we love, like, for example, our parents or, our siblings. Okay, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. So, for example, one of the ways to show respect to your parents if they pass away is to keep in touch with the people who are dear to them. We find it difficult to even do that. We might do it initially for the first couple of months or something, and then everybody just gets busy in their own life. But this was not the case with the Prophet ﷺ. He would remember Mus'ab ibn Umair, he would remember Khadija radiallahu anha, he would remember his uncle Hamza. It's very sad. Towards the end of his life, he went to the cemetery in Uhud, where 70 of his companions had been killed in the battle. And he went and he spoke to them and he said to them that, that soon we will meet. So he would remember these people, and he would keep going there, and he would, he would do whatever he could do to revive their memory. So Khadija radiallahu anha, when she was alive, she was a very special person. One day Jibreel alayhi salam descended on the Prophet ﷺ and said, Khadija is going to approach you now, and she is carrying for you some food. When the Prophet ﷺ would go into Hira, she would bring something for him to eat, now and again. And I mean, when I look at Hira, I just think, that you need courage to go up there and come down from there. It's not an easy task. I mean, we complain and grumble about cooking food and making rotis or something for our husband, where we're, just in the kitchen in the daytime, we're at home, in the comfort of our home. What about, if we had to go up a mountain to give him something and come back? So this woman, she really went out of her way to support her husband as much as she could. And she was not a young, spring chicken or something, she's an elderly woman. But she really looked after him and she really respected him. We can learn so many lessons. Just, have a halaqah or have a series of halaqah about Khadija radiallahu anha and her marriage to the Prophet ﷺ and her dealing with her husband. A lot of us, we treat our husbands like our equals, so we'll have arguments, we will lash back at him, sometimes we'll do things when we're in the mood, sometimes we won't do things when we're not in the mood to do something for him. But this woman, although she was older than him, and she had an upper hand because she was wealthier and she used her wealth to support his cause, but she had so much respect for him and she was so polite and kind with him. So there are so many lessons to be learned, even for ourselves as married women from that. So Jibreel came and he said to the Prophet ﷺ that Khadija is going to approach you now and she is carrying for you some food. When she arrives, tell her that Allah is giving her salam, and tell her that I am giving her salam. So Jibreel alayhi salam is conveying Allah's salam to Khadija radiallahu anha, because she is supporting his messenger. And how much honor is there in that? And then the best of the angels says that I am giving her salam as well. So give her my salam. And this is how special she was, not only to the Prophet ﷺ, but to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and even to the angel. And then Jibreel said, and give her the glad tidings of her place in paradise. So she was told that there would be this palace for her in paradise, and so she was confirmed a place in Jannah. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the greatest women that ever set foot on this earth are 4. Anybody know them in the right order? Yes?
Khadija, Asiya.
No, the first one is not Khadija. Who's the first? Yes, Maryam. Then, no. Yes, Khadija. No. Fatima, and then Asiya. So it's Maryam alayhi salam, and Allah says, A'udhu minash shaitanir rajeem, وَإِذْ قَالَتِ الْمَلَائِكَةُ يَا مَرْيَمُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ اصْطَفَاكِ وَطَهَّرَكِ وَاصْطَفَاكِ عَلَى نِسَاءِ الْعَالَمِينَ. And when the angel said, O Mary, indeed Allah has chosen you and purified you and chosen you above the women of the world. So Maryam alayhi salam is number 1. And then is Khadija radiallahu anha, then is Fatima, and then is Asiya. If you notice something common amongst all these 4 women, they're all linked to Anbiya. They're all linked to prophets. 2 of them raised Anbiya. Who are the 2 who raised Anbiya? Maryam and Asiya. And one of them was a wife and one of them was a daughter of an Anbiya. Right? So they're all linked to Anbiya. And the Prophet ﷺ reaches the age of 25, like we said, and he is in an environment which is corrupt. And in that corrupt environment, he is known as being chaste. He has never womanized or done anything like that until that age. And it is very important to mention that because, like I said, that, he's constantly attacked on his love for women and, marrying little girls and, the kind of horrible things that people say. Let's look at his marriages or some of his marriages and try and, dismantle all these accusations and these, this confusion that might be even in Muslims' minds. Because I know Muslims who find it very difficult to defend the Prophet ﷺ. When somebody attacks them and says, oh, the Prophet ﷺ did this, they're just quiet. I mean, when you're quiet, that's like you're accepting that, yeah, you're right, he was this and that. But that's not the case. So, number 1, this is a famous hadith, maybe you have already heard it, but Aisha radiallahu anha, she talks about the 4 different types of relationships that existed in Makkah at that time. The first was a traditional marriage. The second was legal brothels, which had flags on top of them to invite people, whoever's interested can come here. The third type was a woman could sleep with as many men as she wanted, up to 10. And then if she became pregnant, she could go and she could select any one of these men and say, okay, you are going to look after me and the child, which is really messed up. And the fourth type I find really difficult to comprehend, but a man would send his wife to sleep with a noble man just to incorporate noble lineage into his family. So, he would send her and say, go and cohabit with such and such person. And if she would become pregnant, he'd be really happy that, okay, now I've got noble lineage in my family. So you can see how corrupt and messed up the society was. And the Prophet ﷺ is growing up in an environment like that, and he is chaste, and he has never done anything incorrect or inappropriate. So if he was, like they say, had love of women and children and that kind of thing, why would he go and marry somebody older than him, and why would he be chaste until now? Because the society would not have looked at him as bad, because this was common, right? So it's not something that somebody would have said, oh, he did this or he did that. It would not have been like that. Okay. The second point is that he marries a woman who is not even a virgin. Okay, so if he was after virgins, then he would go and find a virgin for himself. But that's not what he did. He married somebody who was either she was widowed or divorced. So she'd already been married. So this is not what he was after. And he does not marry anyone from the age of 25 until the age of 50, which is really the age you would think is the age of most desire for a young man. I'm not saying that men don't have desire after 50. Yeah, they do, but I'm talking about when their drive is the maximum, right? One would say it's probably until around 50. After that, everything slows down a little bit. So in his prime youth, he did not go and marry anybody else, because that's not what he was after. That is not why he got married to so many women. We will talk about the wisdom in why he married the women that he did a little later on. One of the women he married after Khadija radiallahu anha died, for about 2 to 3 years, he didn't marry anyone. And then the first woman he married was a woman called Sauda, and she had been in Abyssinia where her husband had passed away. She was an elderly woman, and she came back and she was very distressed and distraught that she had lost her husband. And out of compassion for his ummah, out of care and feeling the responsibility to look after his ummah, he married her to give her support and to look after her. And as you may or may not know, later on, Sauda, she gave her night up to Aisha radiallahu anha, because that is how old she was. So again, that was not a marriage from desire or anything like that. Okay? And again, it was a married woman who was elderly. Okay, that's his second wife. Sorry? Yes, perhaps he needed a woman to take care of his children, but primarily he did it to just look after her. Okay. Within the last 10 years, the Prophet ﷺ ended up marrying many women, and the rules for him are not the same as the rules for the rest of the ummah. So because there was some hikmah, which we will talk about, why he was allowed to marry so many women and why he needed to marry so many women, that does not spill over to us. We can't say, oh, I'm following the sunnah and I've got like 13 wives. We cannot do that. Okay, but there were reasons why he was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have these marriages. So why is it that in these last 10 years, because when he died, he left behind 9 widows. Why is it that, he had these consecutive marriages in the last few years of his life? The first reason is to forge alliances with different tribes. The Prophet ﷺ devoted all, and when I say all, I mean every single effort of his was to spread the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to establish La ilaha illallah. That was his primary goal, is to promote Islam. And whatever it needs, he will do it. Even his decisions in marriage would be based on what benefits Islam. He's not thinking about himself, he's thinking about the deen of Allah and how to promote it. And so the Prophet ﷺ married, sometimes he married people from different tribes to bring them closer to Islam. Like, for example, do you know one of the women he married and then her whole tribe became Muslim? No. Juwayriyah, yeah. So Juwayriyah, when he married her, because she was a daughter of one of the nobles, but she had become a slave after the battle, and she was captured, and when he married her, her whole tribe became Muslim. So this was his, ultimate goal, is to promote Islam. The second reason was his care and his concern for his companions. Like we said, he married Sauda out of, concern for her, because she was very distraught when she came back. and she had lost her husband. The third reason is that he wanted to strengthen ties with his closest companions. So if you see, he married the daughters of Abu Bakr and Umar, and he married 2 of his daughters to Uthman and 1 of his daughters to Ali. So now they are not just his Islamic brothers, but they are his family, right? And he needed to make them that close, and that's why he had to have some exchange like that. And for Uthman radiallahu anhu, he was very keen on having this kind of a close relationship with him, and he married 1 daughter to him, and she passed away. Then he married another daughter to him, which is why he's known as Dhun Nurayn. And he said that if I had 99 daughters, I would have married them one by one to Uthman. You know that? This is what he said. So it was very important for him to forge these ties with certain people that were very important for him to be close to. And the fourth reason is the most important reason, which I think we will discuss next time, inshallah. But it is like I said, the most important reason why he had these marriages. And I will just mention it now, but it is conveying the religion. Basically, how Islam got to us and how all these ahadith got to us, and how, how to lead our life, basically. How that information has come to us. If he did not marry so many women, and if he only married 1 woman, I don't think we would have the wealth of knowledge that we have today. And as far as Aisha radiallahu anha is concerned, inshallah, we'll talk about her in detail as well. But if you think about it, she married him at the age of 6, and she was widowed at the age of 18. That is exactly the time or the duration it takes for a person to complete school. You start grade 1 at 6, and you finish high school at 18. And it was basically like, she went through this whole sort of tarbiyah and system, this education system, to convey it to us. It's like, you go through a whole education system to, become an engineer or a doctor or something like that. Because who's conveyed the most number of hadith? No. Abu Huraira. Do you know how many? About 5,000. Okay. Who's number 2? No. No. Yes. Abdullah bin Umar is number 2. And he conveyed about 2,600. And who's number 3? No. Anas ibn Malik. Okay. And number 4 is Aisha radiallahu anha. And she's also about 2,000. So if you see from 2nd position to 4th position, they're all about 2,000. It's just Abu Huraira who, wins the flag of 5,000, mashallah. But, she had a quirkiness in her where she could question the Prophet ﷺ. Because the other Sahaba, some of them said, we can't even describe him. Because they said, we have so much respect for him, we can't even look him in the eye. But Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, the Sahaba would hear a hadith and go. And she said, I would question him. And I would say, why? Why do we have to do this? Why is this like this? Because she had that position. She had that status with the Prophet ﷺ where she could say something like that to him. The Sahaba could not. The Sahaba had too much respect for him. So, all these things we will take into account, inshallah, we'll talk about it in detail. But this is the most important reason for his marriages, is conveying the religion. Because if he did not do all these marriages, I'm telling you, we would not even have half of what we have today. We would be lost. So it is the biggest blessing for this ummah is the Prophet ﷺ's marriage to Aisha, which was divinely commanded. Okay, inshallah, I'm going to stop here with the dars. I just want to ask if anybody has the answer to last week's question. The one person that the Prophet ﷺ killed? Anybody? No? Okay, I'll leave you in suspense. Try and find out for next week, for next session. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.